And we're rolling with the
You're
G,
in.
the hard G,
Rolling.
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 Yeah, to get us started there, I just wanted to mention that the whole reason I think poverty was a good topic tonight was because it started off with a post that my uncle made on Facebook this afternoon. He posted this article about Toronto, it's where I grew up, and the article was showing that they sort of created this sort of restaurant, and they're kind of like igloos, but like they're glass bubbles, and they're super fancy. You know, for 150 bucks, you can rent them out, and it's a fine, one of the finest restaurants, one of the top chefs of the world have they work there and everything. I think
By the
from
way, I will be munching.
no problem.
Mentioning food.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, so you can get this restaurant where you eat in a glass dome. It's kind of cool, and you get served food from the top contestant of last year's chef, one of these chef shows, Top Chef
Cool.
type thing. Yeah. Anyway, they actually built it underneath the expressway or beneath the expressway in Toronto, where just a few weeks prior they tore down a basically a kind of encampment where poor people were living. So you're starting to see more and more of these tent cities, if you will, in Canada and in the States, and they keep getting
Yeah.
gentrified further and further away. So, it's a bridge. I'm sure there's tons of other real estate they could have put these restaurants on, but it's just morally reprehensible to me that they actually, tore down these tent cities and kicked out these poor people, these homeless people who are living there for a very specific reason. It offers some kind of shelter, obviously,
Right.
um, and yet I don't know. So that's number one, and then it got me to watch a documentary that I've already seen a couple times, but it's really good. But it's called "The Streets of Plenty." It's a guy from Vancouver who, I mean, the dude is from a well-off family. He was a student and everything. This is like 6 or maybe even 10 years ago, or something like that. And he decided to go for 30 days and live on East Hastings, especially because, well, one, he was asked, "Hey, I mean, do you think you should go and check these guys out?" You know, um, and two, he also saw how Vancouver was being voted pretty much the nicest city on the planet, one of the nicest to live in, and it's like kind of an interesting contrast when you think that, or when you compare that kind of title to the fact that it also has one of the biggest poverty, drug-stricken neighborhoods. I mean, I lived there for 3 years. I'm telling you, like they have entire marketplaces. It's about 10 blocks, and it's so packed and filled with just people who are drunk
I've
and
been there.
high. Yeah, and like they actually slowed. Like you have to drive 30 kilometers so
Yeah.
that it's like there's an actual. It's spray painted. Like the city put that zone limit so that you don't hit some dude that's half dead in the street. It's pretty insane. So I was watching that documentary, and I realized, you know, there's so much to talk about when it comes to poverty, uh, and it's like I had a few ideas. I was like, well, one, where do you really start to take notice, and where do you grab it by the horns? Where do you think poverty really matters? Because you could say, well, these people, they live in North America, at least they can still go to the hospital and get things checked out.
Mhm.
So you can take poverty to its logical conclusion and say, well, it's more important to take care of poor people in third world countries who, you know, are just struggling to find water so that they don't die of dehydration. Like that's, extreme poverty. What matters most, and how do you fix it, and all these problems? It's like, it seems to me an important mission because yes, global warming and all these other problems, but you would think that ultimately there's no point in surviving if we can't even fix the most basic needs of human life.
There's quality versus life versus quality of life.
Yeah, it's like,
I don't want to talk with my mouth full. Sorry, I'll be finished soon.
yeah, no problem. But I think it's an important thing to talk about. I mean, and then what's a bit of an interesting twist, I'm gonna, I guess, open up and be pretty honest about my own life right now. I'm so close to that kind of poverty. Like, it's not even, actually, it is funny. I think it's pretty funny. Um, it's not, I'm not, I'm trying to think, it's not a bad thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's, let's just say that I don't run the risk of being in the streets like other people do. I have people that care about me, and if I want to, I can always borrow a little bit and have a trip home, fly home and stay on someone's couch and be fed up until I get up on my feet. I don't think I run the risk of truly being homeless. Um, I mean, you'd let me in, right?
Yeah, yeah,
There you
of
go.
course.
So even if I were to, like, you know, be estranged from my family somehow, if I had no mother, no sister, um,
Yeah.
then I could rely on my best friends. And even if I didn't have you as my best friend, I've been kind enough. I mean, the
Well,
gentleman who's hosting me out right here in Germany has been kind enough, and we barely knew each other
there you go.
just
And
last month.
that's what I was just thinking is when I was homeless in the Yukon for a while. Um, it was a friend of a friend I had never met before who let me stay at his place for weeks, and we became good friends. But kindness of strangers, it exists.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But I want to
Yeah.
know more. So, like, so my story is basically, um, I came to Germany with little money in my pocket. Um, it dwindled pretty damn quickly, and I was so prepared that to follow through on my plan to come here and just learn the language that I literally came to terms with the fact that I was going to be homeless. And then at the last minute, a couple good things happened, and I'm not.
Often happens that way.
Yeah, it does.
Seems
Like
that
I
way,
said,
at least to
there's a
me.
sort of cushion of let's just call it, mysterious air of safety that that I'm in, that I'm on at all times, almost, right? Um,
Mhm.
that keeps me from truly being homeless unless I decide to be. So, I'm pretty lucky, but I got close, and there was no fear. I'm living a lifestyle that's very free, and I'm kind of living simply. I've learned to appreciate things as they come, and I've literally staked my entire life on this idea that it's okay to live simply and without a plan. And so, you, you know, I'm trying to put that into perspective as to poverty as well, because you could consider me poor. I mean, I've got less than 200 euros, which is maybe $300 in a country where I still don't have an apartment. I have a job coming up in 2 weeks in Munich, which I'd have to get to. But that money, at least it's in a camp, so I'm not going to be. I won't have to think about food or shelter. But that's literally going to keep me going for who knows how long. Because, like, I have 2 weeks of work and then I have a month off. So the money that I'll make it during those 2 weeks will have to last me for a month. I don't know where I'm going to live. I don't know how I'm gonna eat every day. Um, and then I'm going to go back to work. So I'm going to be doing this all summer long. I'm very, like, kind of living frugally. Is that the word?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an interesting kind of thing. And then I realize, could I be considered poor? Am I poor? Because I have a place to eat, and I can eat. I have a place to sleep. I take a shower every day. Um, I don't consider that to be poor. Whereas most people would be like, "Yeah, dude, you're sleeping on some guy's, in some guy's living room floor, in a country you don't know, and you don't know the language, and you don't have a place, you don't have any savings. Like, what the fuck?" And it's just maybe how my outlook would have been a while ago, but I'm really starting to rethink poverty. So
Right.
you, having actually lived in true poverty, like in the streets.
I wouldn't say that. I still
Well,
had options.
yeah, but you still lived in the street. I see. This is another thing. I watched several documentaries tonight, and there's actually, you'd be surprised, several people who choose that way of life. Young
Hmm.
men like you
Oh,
and
I
I,
know.
who literally just, it's as simple as, well, this, I'm kind of paraphrasing after the guy, but he says, we go to work jobs that we don't like most people. Some people enjoy their work, but most people just don't like their jobs, man. He's like, I don't want to work. And he said that's straight up, I just wanted to travel. It seems to be that that's what most people want, is to experience life and travel. So I chose this. That's what he said. And at the end of the mini documentary, they asked, what advice would you have for the world? Like, what's your piece of wisdom? And he's like, and he genuinely told them, he's like, no, man, I can't tell anybody what, like anything as to how they live their life, man. Like,
Yes, thank you. That's
yeah,
beautiful.
I really enjoyed that guy.
Yeah.
So I think I just want to understand, you lived a deeper sense of poverty than I have so far. And I'd like to know how that felt. And
I liked it.
if you consider some of it, like when would you consider it to be true poverty? Because like to me, when I think poverty, I'm trying to divorce the poverty of like not having something with the poverty of being forced into a way of life that you know what I mean? Like that to me is true poverty. Is when you're
Well,
forced into a lifestyle that's really rough.
well, as much money as I might have sometimes, with my health, that's been the case. Could you define me as eternally poor if my health has forced me into a very strict lifestyle that is not easy?
Not necessarily, because you can provide for yourself, right? But like, if you take about a bad drug
I can
addiction,
survive.
or if you take into account a mental health issue and you don't have any family or friends around, you're forced into poverty. You know what I mean? You
Yeah, no,
can't fend for yourself.
I'm just running off of your
Yeah.
definition that you.
So that's what I'm saying. I'm classifying you as not into forced poverty, but definitely you've experienced the kind of poverty which is like you're at $0. You have no savings. You have no one who's just going to send you money, even if, well, you probably did, but you knew that that wasn't an option because they knew that you had chosen this path. So you actually lived on the streets, right? You slept
Well,
outside a couple times,
yeah,
or definitely like in the woods and that kind of stuff.
yeah. I slept in a cave for 3 weeks
Yeah.
at
And
one point, but the I mean, there was one part that was basically just camping. We were working picking mushrooms in the Yukon. But actually, I would say that might have been the poorest period of my life in a sense because there was a large influx of workers ever since there was a blog, I think in 2012, about how you can make $200-300 a day picking mushrooms in the Yukon. People started rushing down there,
mm,
and they don't know how to do it properly. They cut the babies when you're supposed to let them grow, which allows them to grow again.
mm,
So then you can keep picking them, right? So, but then they just eradicated everything. So basically, all to say, there was no money being made except if you had already a ton of equipment. If you had like a helicopter and you could fly really far into the forest where no one else could go. So we were dead broke. We were trying. We could maybe scrape a few dollars a day. At some point, I had gout. Um, I had tried eating some things I hadn't eaten in a while, and I was incapable of working for almost a week. And we could hardly get anywhere. We were miles from any actual place where there were people because well we had to pay for gas too. Gas in itself. I remember there's a few things that happened. Once we got stuck in the mud, and someone dragged us out with his big ass truck, but the door was slightly ajar and stuck in the mud. Let me know if I digress and I get lost in the
yeah.
story or something.
Well,
But
yeah, you're describing some of the hardships and how you
yeah,
kind of fell down the rabbit hole, right? So it's good.
but what happened is that the door was caught in the mud, and when the we had a minivan, a Dodge Caravan. When it got dragged out, it tore the door off, the driver door.
Mhm.
So now we had this minivan that was missing a door. It took us weeks to find a new one and be able to afford to install it again. We ended up in some guy's garage. It was fun, but it was tough because
Is that
we
where
were
you were
trying to pay
speaking?
for food.
Mhm.
But okay, I'm almost finished here. But all to say, at some point we realized we only had enough money left to pay for gas to get us to the closest town.
Mhm.
And so we did that because we were like, fuck this shit, we're not making any money. If we go to town, then at least we could play. We had guitars. We could play music in the street, make a bit of money, find a job,
Yeah. So it
build
all
up from
comes
there.
down to priorities, you know, like I guess you obviously your priority you would think is to eat, but you can't. So you prioritize certain things. Certain priorities become very clear. Get to the next town where you can make money where you'd be able to eat for longer afterwards. Yeah.
Exactly. That's the point I was trying to get to, is that you don't even think about this shit as being hardships when there's no way out.
Yeah, there's a clear decision to be made and you just have to do it. Yeah, I know. So that's why it
You're not even
feels
thinking. There's no anxiety. There's just,
yeah,
okay.
just
Well, sometimes you're like, well, fuck this shit, but
yeah.
you get over it pretty quick. You just have to deal with it. There's no
Yeah.
other choice at that point.
That's where yeah, you feel the most free, I guess, in some sense. But
But
again,
at the same time, I'm going to say there were some people out there. I remember one. He prioritized smoking 2 packs a day
mhm,
over getting food,
mhm. Well,
and
that and that's
I've
a
never seen anyone so fucked up. And
yeah.
I've seen people fucked up, but holy shit.
But you know, to smoke it can stifle your hunger. So that's quite practical to smoke cigarettes.
Yes, but he was hardly able to move after a while.
Well, of course, you know, just smoking cigarettes obviously is not going to cut it. But I can
Yeah,
see
no,
why
it's a good point.
people smoke a lot when they get to the streets. So I think there's a difference too between poverty and homelessness. I think true homelessness is a level of poverty that's incredibly difficult. That's where I think things can become difficult because most people that have experienced homelessness and true homelessness, they all tend to say the same things, that it's caused by addiction and mental health issues,
That Yeah, I can see
or
that.
one or both, or one that caused the other. It's just that's what causes homelessness. And so um, I I'm
I would
trying
say
to
for me it was a health issue, just to say. And that comes close. A physical health issue that stopped me from working often enough.
yeah, that too, right? I mean, of course.
I think that's less common, but it's all to say that there are pretty clear reasons for these things, and they
Yeah,
tend to fall in the same category.
yeah. Um, so like I've had a few experiences where like growing up, I had a few experiences of homelessness in the sense that, you know, we had to go live in attics and basements and you know, never in the street, thankfully. Um, but another time I was homeless was I lived in my car for about 2 or 3 weeks in November, which was super cold. So
That
these
sucks.
I don't consider them to be like to be homeless in a sense. Like it's weird because I'm technically homeless right now and I still don't consider myself homeless. So I think the poverty and the homelessness I'm trying to really get at and talk about is the one that is it's a black hole. You know, you can't climb out of it just like that, even if someone helps you. You know, like go ahead and give some poor person, like some homeless person who has some mental health issues and you know, a drug habit, and you know, you give them 2 grand, you know, to get started. Well, how are they going to work? A lot of the times, these people they can't get work because they have criminal records or they get discriminated against. Nobody
Two
wants to
grand isn't
give
enough.
them. Yeah, it's like you need a lot of money, you need a lot of resources to get a person out of a hole like that. And there's
And
so many of them. And it just seems to be this spiraling kind of um, hole that if you get low enough, then you're sucked in even further. Like at some point, you could have easily become a drug addict, right? If
Oh,
you
I mean, technically, I went through a period of that.
Yeah, but you could have become a drug addict that would have solidified you into homelessness for years,
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
horrible experiences that you hear about, getting raped or beat up, people steal your shit, like the regular stuff, the day in and the day out for the regular homeless poor person, and
Oh,
so that's why I'm seeing a very big kind of variety of homelessness and poverty. I'm seeing like a nuance. It's not clear cut. Um,
but I mean, I want to say, like, because I was in Penticton for a little while, and there's a place called, well, it was a soup kitchen, right? And you would meet all kinds of characters there, but it's people who can't feed themselves, and people who are homeless or can barely afford food. And I mean, it's a mixed bunch, but I wouldn't say that, like, on a daily basis their lives are really really hard or anything. I mean, say in winter for example, that would be fucked up and for sure, but I mean, it's not like they constantly get into fights every day or uh, I just want to make that distinction, right? It happens more, but it's not like an everyday thing.
yeah, yeah. But as long as we see that there is a nuance there, I think it allows us to see a little bit more clearly what can be done about it, and if anything. But I want to explore poverty to the max so that I can
Sure.
maybe
Yeah.
come to an understanding as to how much of a priority is it. And it seems to me like it's got to be a pretty big damn priority. It's got to be up there. Is it bigger of a priority than, let's say, I don't know, fixing global warming? I don't know. I think no, but it's got to be at the top. And so now it remains to be seen if poverty should be kind of approached in the third world or if it should be fixed, in the first world, coming from a first world standpoint, right? Because the third world, they can be helped to some degree and they should help themselves really. Um, but ultimately, if you want the third world to kind of get up there and get on their feet, you're going to need to help them. So which one comes first? Do we help our own in North America or do we help the third world? Today, it's not such a clear answer because, you know, by comparison, there's a lot more poverty in the continent of Africa than there is here in North America. But,
Yeah.
in
You're not
North,
in North America, but
no, sorry, yeah, I keep
yeah.
forgetting it in Europe. But
Yeah.
even in Europe, right? Like the obviously the numbers are a lot lower when it comes to homelessness. But
Yeah.
at the same time, you're starting to see this shift in global politics. A lot of, refugees and, people from the third world who are moving up into Europe and into North America. So it's causing a lot of destabilization. And so now we have to look at poverty maybe from a different angle, not purely from a political or economic perspective, but
You
from
also
maybe,
have to ask yourself, sorry, I mean, like, we see it tends to be more in equatorial countries or warmer countries that we see more poverty or homelessness. But I mean, you don't really need a home nearly as much when it's
warm
gorgeous
out.
out all the time and there's
Yeah.
fruit growing.
Well, this is why we have to make the
Not
distinction
to
between.
say that it's not an issue, not at all. But
Yeah.
I'm just saying
It's just
that's
you have to make an
done it.
distinction between homelessness and poverty, and then the causes for either
Yeah,
or, right? Like in
yeah,
North
exactly.
America, the causes for homelessness and poverty is drug addiction and mental health issues. So you're not going to attack poverty in North America the same way you would in the third world. Portugal saw a lot of the drug issues, and they said, well, the way to attack it is to give them support in
Yeah,
specific ways, right? You need to give them a home, medical attention, psychiatric attention, and jobs, like these four things. And so all the money they were spending on, you know, law enforcement and incarceration and all these other things, right? They decide to divert that money 180 degrees, and so over the span of about a decade, they eradicated um, their drug usage. So basically, a lot of addicts, became much better. It helped the economy. Crime went way down. The economy went up. A lot of benefits came from it, and so it's been proven to work. When you legalize drugs and you divert a lot of money into these social services, it helps. Now the problem again though is you know can it be done? And if it can be done, how can you do it without it being such a political thing? I think that's the problem. The politics, it can be done when the politics gets behind that agenda. You've seen it in Portugal. But the politics they're just not there in North America. It's just not happening. So how are we going to do it without politics is the question. That would be one of the solutions. The solution starts there. It's with that question. How do we kind of create a grassroots revolution to eradicate poverty in North America or Europe and first world countries? And so if you can start there, which I think that would be easier than in the third world, or maybe it's harder. But either way, it's what can be done without government. In the third world, it's a different story. So if we can do it that way, maybe we can look at the third world. Because I to be honest, I have faith in the third world. I think the new technological revolutions are going to revolutionize Africa. We're already starting to see infrastructure go up. It's going to be fine, but it's going to...
I would just say that other countries need to stop interfering first.
Exactly.
That would help.
It can't be political. So, but the problem is we're going to turn Africa into a first world continent, and that's going to cause, I think, another massive sort of a massive wave of poverty that's going to be cemented not in just the lack of resources, which is the case right now, but cemented in mental health issues and drug because whenever you see this sort of kind of revolutionary leap in the economics, like in China, you also see a wave of poverty that gets solidified. Like, people think that China is rich, and it's like, yes, millions upon millions of Chinese people have become very wealthy. They've come from the countryside and they've made very good lives for themselves. But we're still leaving the majority of the Chinese in poverty. Like, China is not well. Sure, it looks great, but go and into the mainland and actually look at the situation. The majority of China's population is poor as fuck. And the distribution of wealth is the problem, right? So how does that get done? Not obviously in the ways that we've tried in the past, like socialism or extreme communism, I should say. But how do you do it? How do you create socialist programs, that distribute wealth in a proper way to stimulate a more capitalist, individualist approach in these individuals, right? In these people who start out with nothing.
Right.
So I got political real quick and then kind of technical, but that's just my end goal is what I'm trying to say is if we start talking about poverty from a different angle, which would be more grassroots, which would be more, ideas, straight up ideas. How do we get together? How do we create cohesion to build something and get people out of a deep hole, to eventually lead us up to bigger issues?
I mean, one thing that we have to say is that we're not economists. We're coming at this from an interesting angle. We have certain philosophies or philosophical tools that we're pretty good with and we have some ideas about. So what we're doing right now, I guess, is taking a practical aspect of worldly issues and seeing how we can take it apart and analyze it. Maybe see it from a different angle, or
Yeah. So here's
come
a
from coming from where we can actually do something.
Yeah, like I just gave it basically a technical breakdown as to what causes poverty and in what ways when we're talking about global economics. But if I give you a solution that usually helps, I mean, look at Bob Marley, right? I think it's a great example as to how poverty, to some degree, um, like you got to admit that he's revolutionized the economy in Jamaica to some degree through his music, right? Through the music industry, through the culture, a lot of tourism and stuff like that. So whether you want to nitpick and say some of that, economy isn't legal, whatever, I still think there's a great import export based off of the cultural revolution that he started. Um, I think he got a lot of poor Jamaicans out of Jamaica and into, I think it's Ethiopia, um, right? And there's still Jamaican colonies there, so and they're thriving. They seem to be doing well, from what I've seen. So it doesn't need to be this sort of kind of front page news kind of revolution,
Right.
right? It can work. Poor people who become average citizens at some point, they never make the front page news, but if it were to happen, it would be a good thing, right?
Right.
Um,
Well, I mean, one part of the perspective that I've been seeing this from for a while, at least economically, is a large part of it comes from, well, there's always the question of demand. That's a classic economic principle, but there's also the concept of lack, right? Do we have enough resources for everybody? And how obvious would it be if there was? Could that be confused with how we're using them? Are resources being used improperly, et cetera, et cetera? I guess you understand where I'm going with that.
yeah, absolutely.
That's a huge part of it. I mean,
But I don't think that,
fundamentally, there's a lot of debate over how much resource do we actually have on the earth, right?
yeah, well, I
How much
mean,
is used by people, and how could we use it differently, and all that. That's a huge part of it.
I think we absolutely do have the resources. I mean, there's an overwhelming amount of kind of metrics or comparisons or whatever you want to call them out there, right? That can prove that there's enough resources to eradicate poverty, at least in the first world countries for sure. There's no way, like the standard multi-billionaires who waste money, like there's just so much resource that gets wasted, and we see this, like look at Akon, right? He came in, he provided electricity for something like 1 million people, right? And he's not the government, he's not one of these big philanthropists who have an NGO.
Right.
And yet these NGOs who do rake in millions every year, they can't do something like that. They can't go ahead and give 1 million people access to electricity. How? I mean, that's because of politics, very clearly. Corruption, politics, whatever. It's not about resources. It can be done. It's just it has to be done without the politics, right? That's where my argument is at. I think there was another kind of metric, or I don't know what you call these fucking things, but someone had told me this, and I looked it up, and apparently it's if women in North America were to stop using makeup, they stop spending, and actually you could say this about a lot of products. If people stopped using like one product for an entire year, they could feed like the entire planet or like all of Africa for that same year, or maybe even longer. You know what I mean? So it's it's insane
I
how,
remember seeing those facts. There's a list of facts like that
yeah,
when I was in primary school. And
yeah,
it's funny how these things kind of they get big and people are like, "Oh wow, this really makes a difference." And then a year or two later, people have kind of forgotten it. I guess maybe because it's not cool to always be harping on the same important details, but
yeah.
it's
The
weird.
issue is that we don't want to do a redistribution of wealth and that kind of shit. That never works out.
That can get dangerous very quickly.
Well, exactly. And look, as I am a socialist, that's the thing. I believe that that's the way of the future to some degree. But I'm a very conservative socialist. I'm very careful. I'm trying to work it out. I don't believe that pure capitalism. I mean, they both have their problems. That's the thing,
Yeah.
right? And so the reason why I prefer to call myself a socialist in that sense is because going towards the future, this automation of wealth, where it's no longer human kind of workforce that's contributing to the wealth. It's going to be automated. Then you're automatically talking about who owns the means of production, and that becomes a socialist thing. You have to share. You have to socialize a lot of the wealth that's going to come out from this, right, to some degree. Because I think currently right now it's like 62 people own the bottom,
I
literally.
think it's gone lower. I think that
Yeah.
was like 2, 3 years ago.
So it's nuts. We're talking about less than 100 people who own most of the world's wealth. I mean, we are already in a situation where we need to do something that's more on the social side. The problem is that people want to apply socialism, as a complete economic system. And it's like, no, it doesn't work that way. You need a mixed economy. That's absolutely necessary. And look, Canada's thrived. We've done very well even through the recession, and there's a reason for that. We have a mixed economy, right? Um, it's all about balance. But obviously, I think there's going to be a big dose of socialism coming into the future that's going to be necessary to counterbalance this radical capitalist sort of overdrive that we're about to hit. There's going to be a massive upshoot of wealth because of automation, and then it's like, well, where's all that wealth going to go? How is it going to accumulate in the hands of the companies
But
who own these algorithms and all this kind of shit? What's going to happen, right?
but the question here is because when we talk about socialism, that's a political concept. But when we're talking about automation, that's a corporate issue.
It's economic.
That's
It's economic,
yeah.
absolutely. But economics is governed by politics, right? You can allow for your economy to run on a capitalist sort of system, which means no laws, no taxes, or whatever, right? And more. Or you can allow your economy to run more on a socialist systems, which means a lot more constraints, a lot more governing of where the money goes and how it gets made. So
But a lot of politics are affected by
yeah, they go
economic
hand in hand.
economic incentives.
Yeah, they go hand in hand. So ultimately, looking at this future where we're going to have to struggle with this, you know, overdrive of capitalism, like capitalism is doing really well, like boom, it's making wealth, right, as it's supposed to, as an economic model. But it's not good with this sort of, maintaining the class system, or at least a good nuance or a gradient, if you will. It's just this sort of collection of wealth that's
Well, it's
unbalanced.
it's getting more and more efficient at making more and more money for fewer and fewer people.
Exactly.
And I mean that can be a good thing in many ways. We need some of that, as you said. But I mean, where are the values, right? Is it just a few people who have a lot of fucking money, and then a lot of people who don't have, I mean, a few people who have a lot of fucking money, and a lot of people who have no quality of life while the world slowly gets torn apart?
Mhm.
That's the question, right?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think, like, going into the future, you're already starting to see people in the first world who are trying to conserve, they're not using as much water, and they're being very, they're doing their part, which is good. But this mentality needs to be turned into something that's a little bit more proactive, rather than reactive, right? So I think it's reactive in the sense that, oh shit, we're running into this sort of lack of resources and global warming. Maybe I should react to that by using less water, less electricity, recycle, blah blah blah. But that's not proactive. Proactive would be, how do I go and fix some of these problems other than just reacting to them? How do I do something that adds a positive measure rather than just equals out the negative kind of impact that you have on your environment? And one of the ways that we can do it, in terms of a philosophical solution, is to inspire, or at least understand, and then try to inspire a cultural, maybe even an artistic revolution, because that's usually how things happen. Obviously the politics and the economics get bogged down, and the will of the people. This is why we entrust democracy to run our governments. Democracy, I think, it doesn't exist just as a political model. I think it exists in people's hearts and their minds. It's like, hey, let's all get together and decide what's good for us, and then make it happen. Why does that have to exist just as a form of government? It can exist as a form of model for organization that's non-political, right? Coming together to do this or to do that. And I think we're going to need that a lot more in the future. A lot more. We're going to have no choice to do it. It's just, I hope that we can do it in a proactive manner before it gets too late, and then we just have to react to whatever bullshit we're going to, get smacked with.
I think a big part of it too is, let's just say you're one of these 50 guys who owns half the wealth in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But what you believe is most people are stupid, gross, and incapable of doing better. They're just going to keep consuming shit and not try to better themselves or do anything good for the world, blah, blah, blah. They think that, say, I don't know, there's not enough resources to keep everyone alive. I'm just giving an example here. If someone who has a lot of power believes this kind of a thing, and that it's okay to not help people because they're not going to use the money well anyways, there is no way to sustain this level of population in the world based off of the resources on the planet, blah, 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 blah. You get what I'm saying, right? Is there any moral incentive for you? And let's just take one of these people who has so much money that they also have enormous international political influence.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any motivation to help anyone? Or at least most people?
I think, like Jean-Jacques Rousseau's social contract, that there's perhaps a fundamental, kind of cohesive, I don't really want to I'm trying to stay away from the word morality, but definitely there's an idea or an ideal, if you will, between people, that there's a contract to help each other out. I mean, that's what made us human to begin with, is this sort of idea that I don't want to die, and I think I can survive with you as someone I could cooperate with. But then in our process of cooperating, we became more human in the sense that not only do we survive if we cooperate, but we're happier. We want to share life together, whether we have more or less, as long as we survive. So it's not a problem of survival anymore, and yet humans still cooperate and they still want to share life with each other. So I have, let's say, an optimistic viewpoint of on the world in that sense. I think as long as the top 5%, let's say 10%, we're part of that, by the way.
Yeah, I know. We're part of the 1% almost, technically.
Yeah, exactly. If we really want to live in a world where we can only interact with, let's say, 200 million people on the planet, and do what they do and share experiences with them, that's a very small world. And then whenever you go traveling, we're already doing it now. Like, do I want to go to Pretoria or Soweto, actually, in South Africa, and experience the culture there while also seeing them, kind of not be able to get their kids to school because it costs money. It's like, yo, great. Here's a new part of the planet. I want to experience the beauty of human culture and life in this beautiful part of our planet. But um, all I can do is look around me, and these people aren't even thinking about living a life in which they could experience the kind of experiences I'm chasing. They're just thinking about how the fuck do I put food on the table tomorrow, right? So I think we're already in a world where we're starting to see that more and more. I mean, I see a lot of Europeans who go down to Africa. I know I met a nurse here. She's about to leave next month. She's from Munich, which is one of the richest cities I've ever fucking seen in my life. Holy shit. And they just go, man. They want to see a better world. So the top 10% needs to do something about it, a little bit more beyond just, hey, let's get the top 0.5% to like make sure that they distribute all their wealth. It's like, well, Bill Gates is already doing everything he can. I don't know if is or not, but he's not doing shit. We're already starting to see who else is a big philanthropist. What's his name? The investor. You know what I'm talking about. Why am I? His name is escaping me. Anyway.
I feel like I know who you're talking about, but
yeah, the guy. He's actually super laid back, right? Like he's the famous for saying that he wants to be taxed or something like that because he makes way too much money. But anyway, a lot of these guys, a lot of these billionaires, they have philanthropist groups and NGOs or whatever, and nothing gets done. I don't understand it. If they can just pop a billion here, pop a billion there, I know that they say it's complex because of the politics, and it's like, we're trying to do it in a way where, you're stimulating something in like locally. You can't just go to a country and dump money because then that really fucks that shit up even more. I understand that. But with that same money, you've got to be able to do something different rather than just, trying to, like, why don't you just pay the government workers? Pay the government to workers, you know what I mean? Proper wages and hire them. Train and hire them from the grassroots villages and cities, you know what I mean?
Well,
Make the people the government directly by training them to govern themselves. I mean, the government that's in place and the people that kind of step on each other's heads to get to government spots so that they can filter money out of the system and out of these philanthropist groups. You got to bypass them. Why is that so fucking complicated? I don't know. Maybe I should go find out myself.
Well, there's a lot of possibilities. I worked with a company called the IDARF. What was it? The International Drug Research and Awareness Foundation. And the guy who started it told me that it was the whole charity world was bullshit. I'm not saying that that's necessarily true, but it's just I'm just offering a perspective here or some experience. Not that I have that much experience in the world of charity whatsoever, but he was, yeah, I don't really know how it works exactly, but he was saying that an enormous part of it is not about really helping anyone. It's really about tax exemption and political corruption.
And that's what I'm saying is you're not the first to tell me that. I've actually met a few people in that world too, and I've also met people who advocate for the very idea I'm advocating right now. True, like pedal to the metal, grassroots. She's from Burkina Faso, and she's just studying. She comes from a very. We were sitting in a cafe last summer, the one we used to go to, Cafe. Come on.
Figaro?
Yeah, Cafe Figaro. And she told me, at some point in our conversation, she looked at the doorstep and she said, "Well, you see that tile on the ground there? It was just the tiles. There was some ceramic tiles, I guess.
Right.
And she said, I remember a time in my life when um, I looked at ceramic tiles at the foot of a doorway in some house in my neighborhood, and I considered them to be rich. I considered that to be, well, like just ceramic tiles. You know, she considered that to be something, you know, that was privileged. And now, you know, I think one of her parents is has a piece of land, is an investor or something like that, and the other works in the middle management government, nothing like high up or anything. And she's went off and studied in Norway, and now is in Canada, started her own business, you know, and she's working to try to bring people together. She wants to set up conventions, and she's studying the economics and the politics. She wants to go back there and help the people come together and fix their economic problems. You know, just straight up. You know, and I agree with that. But at the end of the day, it's a balance, right? Like I said, you can't just hand people money and then like throw money at it and then it's going to work. That's why socialism has it wrong in that sense. But
Can I
capitalism,
just, sorry, there's a story
yeah.
back
Let me
back
finish.
like Arthur and the Round Table. Just want to say there's a story about that specifically.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then keep it in mind. But
Yeah.
so the socialists are like, yeah, like let's just throw money at it and like let's set up these systems. And it's like, no, obviously people kind of take advantage of it and they just want to suck it dry. And then the capitalists are like, oh well, just teach them how to work for themselves and do things like that. And it's like you need a bit of both. You need a bit of both. I think it starts with education, honestly. Educate people and so funnel the money into educating people, right? But you can't educate people if it's like I don't understand. People kill themselves. Like like this girl that I'm talking to you about. She, it did everything in her life to go and study and to become educated, become aware. That's the true power. So why is it that we're just putting money towards food and roads and infrastructure? And it's like, yes, all these things are good, but people can build their own roads. People can grow their own food. People can do their own things if they know how.
Right.
Knowledge, man. It's always been about knowledge. So why the fuck isn't all that money that they're like UNICEF and World Vision and all that, why aren't they just putting it towards schools and teachers? I'm sure you know how much a nurse gets paid in Sudan or Nigeria, which is the nurse that I know. Or a let's say a surgeon, they get paid like 80,000 euros. Like that's
Okay.
or not 80,000. Sorry, 18,000 euros a month.
Oh, okay. That's very different.
Yeah, like 18,000. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Right. But still, it's difficult to get them down there. Now, why would that be? Because it's fucking war zones. People are dying. You're far away from home for a year. You're seeing horrible shit. You're at risk for malaria, whatever. 18,000 euros. That's nothing. Of course. I mean, sure. And I might be getting my numbers wrong, by the way. I'm extremely tired, but it's definitely over 10,000 that I know a month for surgeons. So $10,000. Euros, I don't know, but it's definitely a great living wage. But this money means nothing to them. They see bullshit happening over. They don't have to go and do it. They can make pretty damn good money, maybe even a similar amount back home, and still yet they go. And so obviously the money doesn't even work for the people who are already educated, who are come from the first world. So you can't even throw money at people who are wanting adventure and wanting to help the world. You can't even throw money at that. So it's definitely, if you're going to throw money somewhere, throw 10 grand at a teacher. The fucking teachers today that are making shit money in North America, or I don't know how much teachers get paid in, let's say, high schools here in Europe, but North America it's not too fucking good. But give him 10 grand a month to go teach in South Africa or
That's the interesting thing too, because I feel like this comes back to responsibility, like the last episode,
Mm,
because for an individual to do that, they have to know a teacher that they trust,
mm,
right? And there are many cases where similar services or systems have been put in place where for example, I don't know, it's like a website and it's kind of like a Kickstarter. And it's support teachers in third world countries, and then people send that they link their PayPal or whatever or their credit card to the website to donate money, but then the website takes a good chunk of it, right? And then they send that money to people who distribute that money, and they take a good chunk of it, and sooner or later there's always some corruption that starts popping up. And I mean, I don't have a specific example for the teacher example, but like with UNICEF, I heard this when I was a kid, that it was a common problem that they would donate a lot of money and clothes and everything to a small village, or and then the whoever is the chief or whatever it works, let's just say mayor or whoever is in charge, abuses and takes most of the resources for themselves.
mm.
So how do you give to an individual
So
who's
that's what
having
I'm saying. I'm not saying you don't give to an individual. What you have to give to an individual is knowledge, right? For them to help themselves, right? And how do you do that? You don't do it by giving it to another individual in the same country or in the same situation for them to teach the other individual. I mean, you need volunteers, from the first world who go, and it's like they have their own schools. We're already doing it, but for money. You have, like Oxford in China or some shit like that. I might be getting that wrong, but you're getting a lot of British and American schools in different countries. A lady that I know teaches or taught at some American university in Jordan. I know people who've. This is why you go to the Middle East, or you go to. Today I met someone who's purely German, grew up in Germany mostly. I spent some time in Washington and other places, but they've got a perfect American accent because they go to an American school here in Germany. So, I would set up purely, like first world schools. That's where you put the money in. On the teacher, building the schools and the costs and all that, just like you do for profit in other places, but you make it as a nonprofit and you educate people, and then over the course of 2 generations, boom, you've got yourself something happening. If I were to put a camera in some up and coming artist's hands somewhere in, let's say, Tanzania or whatever, that person could very well make movies that will inspire a culture and a movement that's going to help. You put a guitar in Bob Marley's hands and look what he did with it, right? It seems to happen on that level. Whenever you want change, it's knowledge somehow that people can share. We've done that. We've seen that through art. It's happened through art many times in the past. But we need to do it with more practical knowledge now. We need to do it through education.
Well, yeah, I mean, culture and education are basically at the root of all either good or evil.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
either a manipulation of knowledge or a sharing of knowledge. How do I say? What's the word for that? A transparent sharing of knowledge.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
My question here is how do you make sure that the correct information gets out? And that's a whole other topic. But
yeah, that is true. But look, I think teaching someone how to code, UX design, graphic design, deep AI, deep learning, whatever. This is all information that people. It's open source anyway, so there is no deciding what is good, what is bad information. It's all just open information anyway. So I think the internet is, the internet and education. These are 2 things that will stimulate the economy. right?
Hmm.
So I mean, look, why is guys like Elon Musk, who I think is cooperating with Richard Branson and a couple others or something, to create a global internet satellite system to bring internet literally worldwide. Uh, it's because they know that if you do that, then you're stimulating the economy and you're stimulating growth in parts of the world where we need that right now.
You're helping more people become internet marketers. Great.
Well, I mean, not just internet market. It's not
I
just
know, I
about
know.
marketing, but it's about communication, right? If people can get together and communicate together, then you can create business.
Hmm.
It's amazing what you can do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know. I mean, yeah, we don't want any more. What is it? Somalian or Nigerian internet scams. But
We're, we're probably going to see an influx of those.
yeah, exactly.
I think it
But
was not long ago that there was a huge boom in India, people having getting access to the internet, and the amount of memes that came out of that
mm,
was beautiful. It was hilarious.
yeah, yeah. Well, dude, it's interesting how creative they were. I think I
Oh
had
yeah, for sure.
seen some old documentary where they a few neighborhoods would get a computer for the neighborhood. People could come as like at the community center, and
Oh,
it's to make sure people get a little bit familiarized with it because they need to be computer literate to some degree, right? Um,
right.
but also look at what you can do on Fiverr. You can literally just pay some kids in India to do a funny dance and say, I don't know, Oliver's a poo poo head. Just they can just sing that, and a lot of people do it for their movies or just as a prank, and it makes them money. They got pretty creative in India.
I saw a great meme recently. It was now there are two of them. There's a pay me $50 and I'll pretend to be what was it, a relationship, a couples psychiatrist, a couples therapist, and tell whoever you're with that they're wrong about everything.
Mm.
And then there was another one is pay me $50 and at your funeral I'll stand kind of far away with a black umbrella and make it seem like you had some deep dark secret. See, you got a business right there,
That's creative, I'll admit. Very
right?
funny too. I like that. Yeah. But I think like yeah, when you boil it down, we've kind of we've went through the circuit of technical complications and all that. But if you really look at the simplicity of what works, right? I think I think it's kind of crazy that we're not doing these things. And the people that are doing it, who are actually trying to do it, they're just not supported enough. But if we could expose the truth of it, of how simple it is, then it could swell, perhaps. You know?
And I mean, I'm always the one who's ready to introduce this aspect. And again, it's not to say that it is real, but there could very well be very powerful people who don't want what's good for everyone. I don't
Yeah,
know. But
that's
I'm just saying that there's a lot of money in having power over people.
yeah, no,
And
that's
there's
clear.
probably a lot of financial incentive.
Yeah, that's clear. I mean, you don't want but I think in the new world, th- there's no. I mean, in the new world, you're going to see a rise in quality of life one way or another because I think people are products now, right? This is very clear. We see this already. It's out there. It's not a conspiracy. You,
Companies are people, people are products now.
yeah, like literally, companies are people and people are products. That's beautifully said. I'm gonna put that on Facebook or something. Um, so, the logical conclusion you can arrive at is that you need people to become products, and they can't do that if they're in the desert, under a mud hut. They need to be jacked in. So quality of life will go up for everybody, but only after a few 100 million die from displacement, droughts, whatever. But the ones who remain after the initial, let's just say, bleeding out of humanity, this airing of then yeah, I think people will live quite well. But if you want them to live well, um, and free, then we're talking about making sure that they're educated. Because look at today, you've got lots of people who live super well, right? Fat fucks who just sit back and suck down burgers from goddamn, I don't know, what's that place that's
Dawn until dusk.
yeah, whatever. But from dawn until dusk, they're just, sucking down hamburgers and just super filthy rich, right? And they don't know shit. They're not educated. These people are products. These people make money for big companies, and yet they live in the first world. So the idea is not just to fix physical wealth poverty, but to fix the poverty of the mind of knowledge. So I think it's two birds with one stone. Install quality education so that people can create their own economic systems in their own communities and their own things and infrastructure. And at the same time, you're ensuring that in this new century where people becoming products becomes a thing, that not too many become a product, and not completely like complete zombies. At least they'll have knowledge, a wealth of knowledge as well. Yeah, I'm really happy, dude. I didn't expect to end this conversation with like a clear solution. At least a clear solution that I can really get behind and say, yeah, I believe in this. And so it remains to be shot down now. I think people are gonna have to poke holes in it and say, well, what about this and what about that? But I think,
well, I mean, what I would say first of all is that what you're suggesting is not easy. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who are trying to do that kind of shit, and there's a lot of people who don't want that kind of shit to happen. And
yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not easy.
Why it gets really complicated along the way. I'm just saying that.
It's not easy, but not for the reasons that we think it is, I think. I think it's not easy for different reasons. Like I said, you said it's true. It's not easy usually because of corruption and down the chain, if you will. There's always some fuck-ups because of politics or this or that. But ultimately, that all goes out the window if you take philanthropist money, pure philanthropist money that's already being invested in the millions, that's suffering that process of corruption and inefficiency and blah, blah, blah. So you get rid of that process entirely. You still have that money. So what do you do with it? Well, I think it's straightforward, man. You do nothing else but invest in solid quality education, paid and bought for and supplied by people in the first world. That's it.
Okay, you're saying that the millions that Bill Gates is investing in buying cereal for the Maasai should instead go to teachers.
Absolutely, teachers and decent facilities. You don't need some fancy Harvard fucking gymnasiums and fields and shit.
Right.
Fuck all that. You need rooms with computers and chalkboards.
You could fucking do it outside if you have the right resources.
Exactly. And quality teachers that can and by the loads, man, by the loads. Just simple schools, but the quality of the teachers.
And then soldiers to protect them.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing: is like at the end of the day, what the fuck could a soldier do if they come in and loots? What they're gonna loot? What exactly?
Right.
If you install education in every community, there's nothing to rob really, and if there is, it can't be very much. What's a warlord gonna do with a couple of computers?
Well,
the politics is going to still be there. The problems are still going to be there. But if you're educating people and you're opening their minds, that runaway effect overpowers tyranny. It always has. The French Revolution is a rare fucking occurrence. I'm sorry to say, but it's just you had the king was so fucking stupid that the first the high class people that were living, they were just so dumb. If they had just been a little bit more, let's say, comprehensive of their politics and their economy, they would have said, okay, well, if we really don't take care of these problems, they're gonna kill us all. But no, they just kept on doing what they did, and there you go. Everybody, revolted against this whole oppressive system. They said, "Well, fuck, there's nothing else to do but revolt." Um, but that's incredibly stupid, right? But what was I making that point? Oh yeah. So that's an incredibly rare thing. It's incredibly rare. People get pushed into poverty very easily, and especially if you're talking about generations of people now who have been living under these conditions where they get killed, because of some warlord in the next town. This is just everyday life. Nobody revolts against anything, and who do you revolt against anyway, right? This is the whole problem. It's just
And
the
with
power.
who?
And with who, exactly. So ultimately, the only way to overpower all of this confusion is knowledge. It's inspiration and knowledge. It's people coming together and saying, we can do better. We don't have to, join the child soldier armies and that kind of stuff, and just fight over scraps. We can actually build something because we know how to now. It's ignorance. It's ignorance.
It's also introducing better values, right? So instead of power
Yeah.
seeking,
Yeah.
which arises not only because of education, it's also if you had a rough life, then that might seem like the logical thing to do is just gather as many resources as possible at the expense of whoever, right? But if you have more, I don't know, like more media encouraging things like courage and compassion, and I mean, those all of those things can easily go wrong. Too, you have to be smart about how you promote these kinds of values, but
Yeah, but not
you know what
even
I'm talking
courage.
about, right?
I mean hard cash, man. Like if look, even if you're a warlord who really doesn't care about governing a country, just wants to take over politically so that you can hog all the resources that there are, what are you gonna do? Like, if you see a much better way out of that, you're gonna take it. So the only way to, it's like what Yuri Bezmenov. You have to go. Well, actually, I'm not sure if you saw, but anybody who's listening to this still, because this is a very ranty type podcast. So, but if there is someone listening at this far, watch Yuri Bezmenov on YouTube. There's only like 3 clips of him, but there's one where it's like a full hour and a half of his sort of training, and he teaches you about what ideological subversion is all about.
Right.
Why can't that be applied in a positive way? The Russians are pretty fucking genius at that, right? I mean, that runaway effect of subverting an entire culture ideologically, it takes 20, 30 years, like you said, right? Now, I mean, the USSR, the communists, it's done since the early 90s, right? But that runaway effect is just hitting us now. That's why you're seeing this whole Che Guevara wearing douchebag, cultural Marxist type. Ooh, it's so cool, Mao Zedong, man. Like, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about, right? This is all a product of this ideological subversion. You're in the third
Yeah.
stage, or
I'll just say people who might hear you say that and be like, sure, no, just fucking check it out. Seriously, this is pretty fact-based stuff.
exactly, yeah. So it's like, yeah, I mean, I love Karl Marx myself. I loved his ideas. I read the manifesto, Communist Manifesto. I think there's a lot of valuable information in there, but the solutions are all wrong. It doesn't. There's a lot of things that also don't make sense. So it's not about one thing or the other. It's about balance. It's about understanding how things apply and whatever. Right? There's nuance there. Anyway, all to say that Yuri Bezmenev's sort of kind of insight into how Russia subverted us ideologically in North America and the West is genius. That runaway effect when you subvert someone through culture and music and media and whatever over time, but most importantly through education. Look at Joe Rogan's podcast. Look at everybody else who's talking about it right now in the educational field. The reason for why you're seeing this polarization and this crazy radical leftism is because ever since the 60s, man. After World War II, you've gotten more and more liberal professors in universities. And now it's literally over 90%. Over 90% of staff. So come on, how can there not be a bias towards the education? It's they're ideologically indoctrinating and they've been indoctrinating students.
And
And so now these students go on to work in every other field out there, right? In law and in politics and in business. And so now you're seeing the ideological subversion, that runaway effect, really starting to do its work. See,
and most
Russia.
people, that's the funny thing, because most people now, if they hear you say, oh, 90% of professors in academia are liberal, they'll be like, good.
Exactly.
Well, guess why you think that?
Yeah, I mean, yes. Oh my God, yes. That's fucking beautiful. Okay, that was too exciting to hear. Yes, if you think, if when I said that you think, ooh, well, actually, I doubt anybody would be listening to me at this point, that kind of person. But if you are and you thought, yeah, that's a good thing, right? No, it's not. And the reason why you think it's a good thing, it's exactly that. So good one. So that runaway effect, why couldn't we do it? Why couldn't we do it in a positive manner? Why couldn't we educate people with the truth and with things that work and things that have nothing to do with religion or what politics? Just the truth of art and how it inspires the human soul, and that it gives us meaning and purpose and it connects us together, and how technology can be used this way and that way, and you can literally play with reality itself. It's like magic. This is what computing is all about. This is what science and biology is all about. Chemistry, you're playing. It's like magic. You're creating. If you can inspire people through art and through passionate education, then you're going to do the exact same kind of thing that causes a runaway effect, where people end up thriving and being polarized, but in a good way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, I think it wouldn't be polarized in that sense then.
no,
Because polarization involves a split.
well, yeah, but it would split literally the dumbasses from. It would split. I think it would split in a good way. Do you know what I mean? It would split the people who really do want to better themselves and their environment, their community, and those who are just going to die out. Those who don't, they're too stuck in their ways, and they'll just die off, because ultimately people who create are the ones who outdo people who destroy. I mean,
Are they though? That's another question.
absolutely, absolutely. This is why, dude. I'm convinced that there's a reason for why capitalism won out, because nobody wants to live eating fucking one potato a week like you did in the USSR. So
Yeah.
who's gonna take that over a fucking steak every goddamn day? And
But the question is, because there's not only the complacent and the good, there's also the bad.
yeah, but this is true. There's the bad. Yeah,
You always have to take them into account too. And I agree. There are probably a lot more good creative people than we think, but there's also a lot of terrible people, I hate to say. Now, I don't know how many, but the question, it's funny because for me, the question so often comes back around to the same thing. How many good people are there? How many people are there who will never try to get better? And how many people out there give so little fucks about others that they are willing to do whatever to get what they want?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a lot of optimism there too. I think people genuinely,
That's good. But
if you show them, that's why it starts with education, and if you inspire them and show them that there's so much beauty and so much to be had, it's a no-brainer. It would be a non sequitur to go for what you've already kind of been indulging in.
what about a sociopath who can't feel those things most of the time?
Sure, I mean, again, there's a lot more people, regular people, than there are sociopaths.
Of course.
And that's all you need, man. I mean, if you're a human being and you want peace and happiness, and you don't want to be living in the shithole desert mud hut type life that you've been living in,
Hey, that could be pretty good. I mean, as
Oh,
long as you have
trust me,
enough
that's
food and
again, it's ironic, but that's what us that's what we do. I mean, that's what I want, man. Like
yeah.
the rich want more of a simple lifestyle. Minimalism is a big thing now, and you still see, people in Africa who spend money on fucking Brioni suits, and they don't even have the money for,
Right.
to put themselves through
And
school.
once again, is like how much. Well, that's something I want to touch on as well. I think I've brought this up in another episode, but with poverty, there's based off of the studies that we do have, happiness seems to go up until a certain range of financial.
Yeah.
It varies, of course, and I mean, it was about 72,000 US when we but that was based off of values maybe 5 years ago, like say at that level of inflation and everything. But but beyond that, they don't really see many benefits in terms of mental health, happiness, quality of life, and all that. And at the same time, we also see in terms of happiness, often it's more rural and poor people, but in areas that are not extremely violent and have a good amount of uh, natural sources of food, right? They're able to the ground is still fertile enough. They have enough production to go around. So just to look at that, it's quite interesting. But like, what drives someone to keep making more fucking money after that range of even 100 grand a year kind of thing? And I mean, I think in my opinion, it's in part um, it's a schism, but a part of it at least is well, a need for control, some kind of trauma, a need for control, the sense that maybe more money will actually give them more happiness or more power. It'll alleviate their risks in life,
Hmm.
right? But once again, something I like to say is we don't really fucking know the risks. Even if you have all the money in the world and most of the people in the world are under your sway, you still have to pay the butler and you can still get paranoid about him stabbing you in the back, no matter how much money you have. It's That's something I really want to get through people's heads is that it's not going to help you at a certain point.
Yeah. No, no, absolutely. So again, like I guess that would be a problem that you have to deal with when you get to it, right? That's a problem that you have to deal with for people in the West and in first world countries,
But
China.
I think this relates perfectly to poverty because poverty is in large part connected to how much people hoard money on the other side. Poverty has a lot to do with wealth.
Yeah, that's the thing is it's been the ongoing debate for decades and decades now, right? I mean, is it a zero sum game or is it not? No, and so socialists seem to think it's a zero sum game, and capitalists are the ones who are like, no, man, of course not. You expand the pie. I think it's a case of both. I mean, you can expand the pie, sure. It's not a zero sum game. That's true. The problem is expanding the pie. Uh, you know, those who can get to that new piece of pie are usually the ones who already have tons of it in their stomachs, right? You
Yeah,
can't
exactly.
discover new pieces of pie if you're way down there feeding off the crumbs, at the bottom of the table. Um, so it's a bit of both, man. It's a bit of
Yeah,
both.
I fully agree.
That ties into the politics, and it's like, again, like I said, it's extremely simple. When you say, look, when you take humans out of the equation, things are fucking simple. They really are. I mean, it's a
Of
balance.
course.
You need a mixed economy. How do you make that happen so it runs efficiently and well? When you put humans into it, that's the problem, man. That's the fucking problem. That's why I'm saying, if you're going to deal with the human, which is the problem, then the solution becomes simple as well. Inspire people and give them knowledge. Show them that there's a better way. Like it's no coincidence that you see movies, futurist movies, where there's like this utopian society where everybody's well off, there's no poverty, and people don't die, blah blah blah. Well, that's fucking possible. I mean, to some degree. Maybe not nobody can die and all that, but it's possible for there to be peace generally and all that, on a much greater degree anyway. There's still, we're still humans. We're
Right.
not gonna, but on a much greater
Well,
degree and a better balance.
one thing I'll say is that I hope so. I don't know. I don't know what's possible or not, but we have to be inspired to try getting there and keep trying. Otherwise, it's impossible. It's
Yeah,
a simple.
exactly. It's impossible otherwise. I mean,
No, who knows? Maybe if we just give up, it'll happen. I don't fucking know, but maybe.
yeah, that would be an interesting irony, wouldn't it be? Hey, speaking of giving up, I think it's time to give up this podcast.
Okay.
All right,
Yeah.
brother. It was a good talk. I'm really happy we got through this one because I was thinking, yeah, I mean, let's talk about something real, less philosophical and abstract. All right, peace.